Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you again for inviting me here to speak to all of you. I think actually, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering right now, what is a socket? You heard him talk about it, but it's hard to conceptualize. So I'm going to start with a quick 60-second video about it.
An idea for clean energy that I think it's fair to say hardly anybody else on the planet had ever thought of. It's quite extraordinary, really. Kick a ball, turn on a light. It's an off-grid solution that gives us a way to bring power and improve quality of life, working capacity, learning capacity.
Great, and while the lights are still dimmed, here's an example of our, or while they're still dimmed, if they could remain dimmed, or not, no? Dim, yes, dim the lights, maybe? We can do this part later, it's fine. So thank you again, anyway, for having me, and hopefully that kind of clears up. And we're back on, we're back. Great. So here's actually one of our balls. This isn't actually going to be our newest ball. Our newest ball is coming out in June. But this is one that we've distributed in Haiti and, Nigeria, across the world so far. And I haven't even really played with this, actually, so I should play with it a bit. But the idea is that 30 minutes of play, normal children play, in a small area, can actually power not just an LED lamp, but any energy efficient appliance that requires about 4 batteries or so. So we're talking about cell phone chargers, we're talking about hot plates, for example, mini refrigerators, and water sterilizers. So if you can see that. Great. So now we have that out of the way. Everyone knows what this is all about. The socket that you just saw, and even also was featured in that video, it came out of a class called ES 147 Idea Translation, Affecting Change Through Art and Science. And I always like telling everyone the specific name of the class because it emphasizes something that I held to believe is incredibly important in terms of trying to understand how a person can be innovative when they're trying to affect change. And that's the emphasis on art and science. So I studied social psychology and economics in school. And I wouldn't necessarily say I was a hard scientist. I had no training in physics or chemistry, nor would I say I was an artist. I can't draw, I definitely can't sing, I don't think I can act. But I think that there's an issue when people assume that because they may not be the supposed experts in either the hard sciences or the arts, that they can't use that methodology, or use rather both of those methodologies, to address real-world issues. In particular, I think that we're all artists and we're all scientists. And when we're able to integrate those methodologies, that's when we start to see the world in a way where everything could be. Everything is what has yet to be created versus what currently is and what has been done. In particular, I think it was important for us, actually, when we're working on this ball, to focus on the fact that while none of us were pure artists, when we were trying to figure out how can we address an issue through art and science, to look at what we had seen in the world and what we believed was beautiful, what was art. And while none of us could say maybe that we had seen, an authentic Monet or anything like that, what we could all say we had seen and what we had experiences in, we're seeing things like this. Kids playing out in a rural township in South Africa. God knows what they don't have access to, what their struggles of the day were, but they're still able to have fun and enjoy themselves and play. This is beauty, this is art. Or here, children running across, playing with a ball that isn't worth 2 cents, yet basically executing moves that are better than David Villa. To me, this is art. This is beauty, and it's all around us. It's not even just in these areas where they lack the power infrastructure. For example, I think this is art. I think the fact that this guy has a significant vertical leap and he's about to do a very awesome layup is a beautiful artistic thing. He's having fun, he's playing. This is art. Again, it's play, it's enjoyable, it's happiness. It's the beauty of this world that we have around us. And it's important, again, to emphasize this because as people, we each have an artistic and scientific side. And I emphasize the artistic side because as changemakers, many of you students here at this school, you've come here because you want to change the world. And one thing that I notice sometimes about people who decide they want to change the world is that they become very serious. You know, you're dealing with very serious issues around the world and you decide, okay, well, I also need to be a very serious person who changes the world in a very serious way. But in my opinion, then you've let the issue win. Rather than let the serious issues that we're hoping to address project a tone of negativity onto us, we should be projecting a tone of happiness onto it. We should be looking in ourselves and realizing that while we do have a serious side, we each also have a playful side. We believe in enjoyment and happiness and doing things just for the sake of doing it. And that, to me, is really the key to making a difference. Because through happiness, then you have hope. And while you may never be able to cure the world of all its problems, if you can project and introduce this idea of hope that tomorrow might be better, half the battle is won. So once we've kind of focused on the idea that in each of us, we can be a bit more playful, that we can combine our ability to be scientists. Again, you may not have a degree in physics or chemistry, but don't forget that science is the study of life. So if you're living and you've made an observation, you're a scientist. That's my general definition of it. So we're all scientists, we're all artists, and we have to look at in ourselves and say, well, how can we use our experiences to project change? And once we've established this idea that play is art, at least I believe that play is art, and it's a worthwhile place to start to solve problems. Just in case you forgot, play is art. Then we can start to look at different issues and say, how can we address them in a way that makes a difference? Now, the world is, again, full of things that are negative. And again, it's not about forgetting that. Specifically for the development of the sOccket, we knew that the infrastructure issue, in terms of developing systems that allow people to have reliable access to power, that was a problem that we felt we could address. In particular, 1.6 billion people have poor or no access to electricity. When living in these areas where they don't have access to electricity, a lot of them use kerosene lamps. It's a horrible alternative that not only is horrible for the environment, but also for ourselves. Let's even step away from the fact that they're dangerous, and many children actually end up growing up with severe burns because of their interactions with kerosene lamps. Living with a kerosene lamp is like smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. It's truly horrible. It's not a solution if it's causing more problems. So when we step back now and we look at this world that we live in, where I've already just said there's this beautiful place where everyone can play. We have it all in us. It's a place where you almost feel like it's a distraction from the realities of the world. What are the realities of this world? It's a world where people don't have access to power that every human being should have. It's a world where people are getting burned from kerosene lamps. The issue here, though, really isn't that we live in a world where these negative things happen. For me, personally, it's that we see them as 2 distinct worlds. We see this world where we can enjoy ourselves and be happy as separate from the real world, the world where things may not always go our way, where things may be a bit more sad than we want to deal with. And to me, I've made it my life mission right now, not necessarily to solve every problem in the world, I think that's impossible, but to integrate our perspectives and our understanding of how we engage with what makes us happy, with play, with the beauty, with the art, and the way we deal with the things that don't always go the way we want to in our lives. The idea is that if we can integrate play into our lives more, if we can simply play more, not just play, again, because we do live in the real world. If we can play more, then maybe things won't be as bad. Maybe people will start to be a little bit more hopeful, a bit more happy. And then even if we don't solve the problem, at least we've made the general being of existing, in this world a little bit easier, a little bit better. So the question, of course, is how do we do this? How do we soften the landing from playing outside with your friends to coming back and struggling to do your homework under a street lamp? How do we make this a little bit easier? At Uncharted Play, we believe that the amplification of existing play behavior with tangible functionality is the answer. What does that mean? Art plus science equals function. You take things that people already love to do, that they would do anyway, that makes them happy regardless of what the result is. And we add an additional functionality. We use our understanding of science, our observations, Google, Wikipedia, honestly, and we combine them. We integrate them. And then from that, we're able to actually get somewhat of a solution. For the sOccket in particular, it was taking something that people loved around the world, soccer, and then harnessing the kinetic energy that was there during play anyway, that would be generated regardless of what you were using the power for, storing it and using it to power appliances that were really needed. So going over a bit about the sOccket and what it is. It is a soccer ball, first and foremost. It's meant to be played with, it's meant to get dirty, but it's also an eco-friendly generator. And now the cool thing about connecting or integrating art and science and using these things to try to address issues is that you always end up with kind of a synergistic effect. You end up with a greater sum than the total of the parts, so to speak. So in addition to getting a soccer ball and eco-friendly generator, we found that it was also an educational tool. It was a great way to introduce not only ideas about science and innovation to the children in these communities, but also health. Gender studies, we found this ball can pretty much serve as a tool in any of those situations. And of course, finally, we really realized that this ball was more than just an actual power generator, but a symbol of empowerment. People, when they use the ball, well, first, they can't believe it exists. And it seems like you're actually introducing this idea of magic again to people who've been told that nothing magical will happen in their lives. And then you're telling them that they're the agents. They're the ones that are creating this magic. By playing, by doing something they love to do, they're getting power out of the ball. Literally, what they put into a situation is what they're going to get out. And it ends up having significant effects, honestly, regardless of the age of the student, whether the person's 5 or 50, we find that it really changes their perspective on what the status quo should be. A few more things about the sOccket. So it's water resistant. Why? Balls will get thrown into some unlikely, less than tech-friendly places. So it's important that if the ball falls into a puddle, if it gets submerged into water, God knows what kids do with balls these days, the product inside, the technology will still work. It's lightweight. Our version coming out in June is going to be about 3 or 4 ounces heavier than a normal soccer ball. It was very hard to do. Trust me, it was very, very, very hard to make it that light, and we're really happy. Does not require inflation. If you notice for normal soccer balls or any sports balls here, you usually require a pin to inflate the ball. I lose every pin I get to inflate a ball. So you can only imagine what it is to then go overseas to Nigeria, for example, and say, oh yeah, here's the pin. So we found it very important from the beginning to make sure we had a ball that wouldn't require inflation and wouldn't deflate just in case it was punctured. 3-year lifespan. One thing that was really important for us at Uncharted Play was to develop for longevity. A lot of companies these days, they design products for the developing world for kind of short-term uses. They don't presume that these people could ever want to value a product or value something as part of their home for longer than a few months. And that was something that actually offended me a bit, being Nigerian. So it was important for us to design something that people can not only become accustomed to and love, but feel comfortable doing this over a long period of time and allow it to become part of their culture and their family culture. Passing down the ball, for example, from one older sibling to a younger sibling was really important to us. And cost effective. So it actually costs a normal family somewhere around, I think, $250 a year to pay for the kerosene for their one kerosene lamp that they're using. The thing is that they get to pay day by day for as much kerosene as they can afford that day. The sOccket is about 1/5 that cost, and it can last longer, and it's safer, and it's eco-friendly, and on and on. So it's not like we're designing something that is great in theory, but no one can actually afford. Of course, there needs to be some sort of business model that allows them to purchase it on a day-by-day basis. But the idea, again, is to design something that these people can truly feel ownership over and integrate into their lives without any obstacles. So we already went over what it can power. I said before, it's pretty much anything that usually requires about 4 AA batteries. So anything you can think of, it can power. The plug, as you know, the world uses different types of plugs, and we didn't really want to deal with that. So the plug is actually a headphone jack. Little did you know, or you might know if you've dropped your iPhone into water at any time, headphone jacks are actually the cheapest way to have a water-resistant plug. So we produce these appliances with the ball, and we distribute them with the ball. That's a picture of a girl in India getting her sOccket, and kids reading. And it really does make a difference in these kids' lives, especially for education. It's one thing where you have kids here who they just don't want to study. They have everything they need to study, and they just don't want to. These are kids who want to study, and they can't. And as many of you know, if the education is stilted, the growth of the community and the ability for the people in this community to start to solve their own problems is also stilted. So I want to make a quick point, though. Some people may say, but isn't it more efficient to use solar lamps or solar plates or a hand crank lamp or anything like that? And I often find that those people just aren't understanding what we're trying to do here with Uncharted Play. We're not in the business of power efficiency. We're in the business of play efficiency, taking what people love to do and making that a bit more, amplifying that. So we truly believe and love everything that everyone's doing around the world in terms of coming up with solutions that give people what they need. But in our opinion, it doesn't really make sense for a solution to be a constant reminder of what you lack. These days, we live in a world that's unbelievably flat. There are people who don't have things, but they recognize that others do have them. And it only makes the kind of distinction between the have and the have-nots that much worse. By building on what people love to do, the issue no longer becomes an issue of what I don't have versus what people do have. It becomes a way of just living your life by building on what you already enjoy doing and making your life that much more happier. In particular, play equals happiness equals a good life. Not directly, obviously, but the idea again is that we can't solve every problem regardless of what we come up with, so why not build on what's working? And that actually brings me to what our approach is. So there's the sOccket, of course, but then there are other products that we're working on. And the idea is how can you also adopt this methodology so you can go on in your change-making path and do something. And the idea here for us is actually pretty simple. We have a 3-pronged approach: care, embrace, amplify. By care, that's relatively the easy part. We don't design products or services without any kind of issue behind it. Things can't just exist. For us, it's always about choosing a problem that bothers us, that we want to address, and making that the root motivator for what we're trying to do. And I think that's particularly important for the people here at the Clinton School, because you guys all are change makers on the verge. You want to make a difference. So you already have that kind of first start idea of caring about what you're doing and caring about the end result. Then the next step is embrace. A lot of people will go from caring about the issue to focusing on the negative, the issue, and building out a solution from there. We start the other way. We know that there's an issue, but then instead of just focusing on it, we take a step back and we take a look at the entire community or situation around that issue, and we embrace that culture for all of its good and all of its bad. So we'll look at, for example, the fact that there are certain areas where there aren't, people don't have reliable access to power. And rather than focus on that, we step back and we say, well, what do these people have? They have a love for soccer. What do these people have? They have communal values that allows people to share things, that makes the ability to raise children easier because it's kind of a village race that raises a child here. We look at that, and that's really important, again, to understand the people you're trying to help and acknowledge and appreciate what they're already doing right. It not only allows for respect of what you're doing, but respect for the people that you're helping. And then finally, we amplify. We take everything we now understand about the people that we care for and that we believe in, and we go from what works from them, and we build the bridge from what works to what isn't working. And that's when we come up with ideas like sOccket. And that honestly can be used in any situation and anything that you guys are working on right now at the school. Moving forward, again, just to jump in, there are a few things other than the sOccket that we're working on that I think would be interesting to share where we've done, when we've been actually executing this approach. One thing, can you hear me now, is actually working on integrating cell phone use with the sOccket. So you already know the sOccket can power things and it generates power when people are playing with the ball. To us, the next step, if you're amplifying the love of a sport that is pretty much the universal sport around the world, why not amplify the use of technology that's basically ubiquitous, again, around the world, cell phones? So the key for us here is to use cell phones to actually allow people to compete with each other, figuring out how much power they're generating with their ball, and then compete with their friends to see who's generating more, as well as share information about how these sockets are being used in different communities, so we can actually measure the impact of off-grid power generating technology in the most remote areas around the world. Let's see what else I can tell you about this. Can't tell you too much because we haven't released it yet, but all I can say that it's really exciting to see how far we can go in terms of connecting to every individual. There are people in this world who don't have shoes who have cell phones. I had to upgrade my cell phone because my cousins in Nigeria were laughing at me. Like literally, cell phones are everywhere. And to be able to harness that power and to let people use it to do something, again, that they love to do, we really think is going to take it to the next level. Another thing we're working on is something called an Uncharted playground. We're still trying to find funding for this, but to kind of set the stage here, everyone knows McDonald's Play Place. It's a fun place where kids like to go. They push their parents to go to McDonald's so they can play in the play place. It's one of the most genius marketing ideas I've ever seen. You normally see a play place next to a McDonald's. But it occurred to us that why would it be so ridiculous to see this? We're hoping to build smart playgrounds next to health food stores in low-income areas. So parents are getting pushed by their kids to go to the health food store so they can play. But it's not just play. We actually want to build into this play place the ability to actually know when kids are playing with it and whose kids are playing with the playground, so that parents get a discount when their kids are playing in the play place. Of course, actually building on the idea that it's not just about eating right, it's also about healthy activity and getting out of your house and off of your Game Boy. We are actually developing this for Michelle Obama's Let's Move program. And in particular, what we're excited about is hopefully developing a large enough power generation system in the play place where children playing with the different playground features subsidizes the electricity costs for the health food store, allowing the health food store to offer discounts to the parents who are purchasing healthier food when their kids are playing with the playground. So literally developing a system just by shifting the way people view play and eating healthy in the way that they actually want to integrate into their lives. So that's actually the final thing that I wanted to show to you guys, and now I'm going to open it up to questions. But if I can leave you with anything, it's just to live playfully. We're all trying to change the world. There's no reason why we can't have fun doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. We do have time for some questions. If you raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. Hillary?
Hi, I'm Hillary. I ate lunch with you. I'm a Clinton School student. My question is, in determining who in the community has ownership of these balls, to make sure that you're not creating jealousy and potentially violence amongst the kids, who gets to have a sOccket in their community? Thanks.
Yes, and as I was saying during lunch, that was one of the first things that we dealt with before even doing any distribution. So we distribute through NGOs that are established on the ground that either are running community centers or have some sort of relationship with the community, and in particular the mothers of the community, because mothers run everything everywhere. And the key for us was to make sure that there was always a system in place, whether it was distributing through schools and having the balls be kept at the school. So the school owns the sockets, and in order to actually get access to them and play with them, you had to go to school. Or letting the community center own them, or the NGO own them. In some situations, we actually do distribute directly to the families, but then we make sure that within that community, each family has a socket. So that's the reason why we get about a few dozen emails every day where people are saying, oh, I'm going to X place, can I get 3 or 4 to go? And we come off really mean when we say no. That's a horrible idea. You're going to go on a vacation somewhere, trying to do good, distribute 3 or 4 sockets, and those kids are going to get their asses beat, and you're going to leave. So that's not sustainable change for us. So we're hoping to further work and partner with the community leaders, even beyond the NGOs, in distribution, and finding out, again, how do they work with things that are communal, and how can we distribute the balls so that everyone is taking advantage of it.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Tammy. I'm actually visiting from University of Hawaii, looking at graduate school here. My question, I've been researching a little bit about microfinance. For those communities that individual households get a socket, what is that financing so that they can? I mean, it's kerosene they're buying on a daily basis. How are they paying for these sockets?
Yeah, so right now, our model starting out, again, because we're a relatively young company, we're going to be hitting our year anniversary on May 9th of this year. We started it with a sponsorship model where we allowed corporations with marketing or CSR dollars interested either directly in the community, like say a Coca-Cola, or indirectly like a State Farm, to actually sponsor sockets that are going through the NGOs to these families. That's the short-term model right now. Eventually, actually later this year, we're going to be breaking to kind of a buy one, give one. That will eventually probably become more of a buy one, subsidize one that essentially allows the families to get a loan, get the ball up front, and then pay daily for their use for it. Of course, that requires a whole other infrastructure system, perhaps working with Kiva, for example, and organizations like that. And so that's something that we're building out right now and testing in a few areas. But the idea is to eventually get to the point where the person who really needs the product is paying for the product with their hard-earned dollars.
Sydney.
Hi, my name's Sydney Shear, and I'm a first-year student here at the Clinton School. My question is about the education component of the socket. I know you said that there's a lot of different educational things that you can teach using the ball, and I was wondering, when you distribute them, do you go in and train communities or train whoever's getting it on this? Is there a curriculum, and kind of how you incorporate this education?
Yes, so there's definitely a curriculum, and we also partner with NGOs. They also often have a significant curriculum of their own, and we never really want to come in and overpower the NGOs. We work with NGOs from grassroots soccer to Children's International, to Homeless World Cup, for example, and they each have their different areas that they're focusing on, whether it's AIDS education to gender equality. So we have kind of a curriculum framework that can be fit into the current curricula of different organizations, and we work with those organizations to train them. And then if necessary, depending on what that organization's methodology or kind of way of working in that area is, we then take a few days to train the actual people who are going to be teaching the children or the families how to use the ball and how to get more of the ball than just the power. So we do take the time to do that, yeah.
Tom?
Tom Peterson, teach a nonprofit marketing class here. Can you talk a little bit about how did you all come up with the idea? Were you all sitting around eating pizza in the dorm late one night and said, I know, let's put a kinetic whatever into how did that happen? Sure,
and I can also tell you a little bit about how it works too, because it's funny. Bill Clinton's a huge supporter, but he has no idea how that ball works. Let's see the story. 4 years ago, I was a junior in college and took a class because it sounded interesting. They gave us funding to do interesting things. 4 girls came together, none of us with any engineering background, and the main prompt of the class was pretty simple. It was come up with a need, and then come up with a solution that uses art and science. So we first came up with an idea, actually, was to develop a system of mobile health records keeping for nomadic peoples, and we presented it for a midterm project. And our professor said, to quote, that's what he said. So it was junior year, and you don't want to fail classes junior year. So literally, this is the reality. It wasn't like we said we wanted to change the world. So we locked ourselves in a room and said, we cannot fail. And we started just throwing out ideas, anything that people were doing that seemed cool. And we're talking about the bikes that clean water and the hand crank lamps and everything like that. And again, similarly, we were thinking about art, thinking about soccer. We're like, oh, well, people love to play soccer. Why can't a ball do that? And with nothing but a high school physics understanding of kinetic energy, we said, yeah, well, it can. That sounds good enough to at least make sure we don't fail this class. So we presented the idea, our professor loved it, we were like, okay, great, that part's done. But then other engineers told us that it wasn't possible. So we decided we weren't going to listen to them. It's for us, people always say, how are you innovative, or how do you think outside of the box? And I always say it's really easy to think outside of the box when you have no idea what the parameters of that box are. So we jumped into this saying, no, it has to be possible. What are you talking about? Our high school physics teacher said kinetic energy exists, this ball's moving, what's the problem? So we built the first prototype ourselves and Googled and Wikipedia'd the Faraday principle and whatnot, and we understood that wires had to be connected for there to be a circuit. That was about it. We did that, we tested it, we said, okay, it works. We did it, we made another model that was a little bit cleaner, went to South Africa, and tested it there. Just basically, again, just a conceptual prototype. It was a shake the charge flashlight inside of a soccer ball. And that's when we realized that the ball wasn't just a soccer ball, that was also a portable generator. It was this educational tool that could really become a symbol of empowerment. That's when we saw kids just amazed at the fact that first they have a ball, because just that is a huge commodity in these areas. But they have a ball that can give them power. It was like magic, and almost like clockwork. Each time we would present the product, I hate calling it a product, but each time we would present it, for 20 minutes there would be awe, and then the kids would come back, and instead of awe, it was, yeah, the socket's cool, but have you thought about improving it in these ways? And I was also thinking of X and Y and Z, and it was like we were just planting these little Einstein seeds automatically, regardless of who we spoke to. And when we came back from that experience, that's when we knew, okay, well, this is what the socket is, and this is what we need to do to make it happen.
Yes, sir.
The novelty of the socket is pretty, I think it's a common around amongst children if they were to be motivated to read or study, especially in their rooms by themselves late at night. And I can't help but think about here in the United States where it would be entirely applicable for kids either in the Delta or whatever ethnic communities might be not without power but needing some kind of motivation. And so I'm wondering if you're doing anything here in the United States. And then secondly, I'm wondering if I can go to unchartedplay.com and buy a couple.
Yeah, so to answer your first question, we actually are developing curriculum that ideally high school and grade school teachers can use in their science and PE classes here in the United States and in other developed nations. I think it's the coolest way to get kids to want to be inventors. I think everyone should want to be an inventor and not believe that you have to have studied something or majored in something to be one. So we're working right now with some professors at Columbia who've been doing some really good things with the educational system there for grade school students. We've spoken to a few people at the Robin Hood Foundation and what they do. And honestly, I've even spoken to people, the White House, David Kapos, for example, is working on a program with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office to get more kids to have patents. So ideally, hopefully we'll be able to develop some programs with them and with the Girl Scouts to just make innovation and make fun athletic science, I guess, something that is really really worthwhile to teach. In terms of being able to purchase it, right now, because we don't produce as many as we need to be producing because we're scaling up and changing our model, all the balls that we produce are kind of committed already for overseas distribution. But ideally, hopefully by the late fall, winter, we're going to have the buy one, give one model in place, and then you'll be able to get one for your kid for Christmas. Oh yeah, there's always a business model to things, yeah.
Anyone else? Well, Jessica, thank you so much for visiting with us, and thank all y'all for coming out, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.